Pop up. Pop up. We are back with more of our best boy Yamazaki. Let's continue, shall we? We're on chapter 3. Alright. Let me make sure. Got it. Let's go. The dawn of the new year arrived. It was February of 1865 and we finished eating breakfast. I was carrying a plate full of tea and opened the door to the common room. Tea is ready.
Oh, すまないね、雪村くん。
I literally opened my mouth to speak and the yawn appeared. I made my way around the room, pouring a cup of tea for each person there, making sure not to spill. He gave me a warm smile as I handed him his tea.
やっぱり寒い日には厚めのお茶がうまいね。
Thank you. I felt a flush of pride at his words, even though I knew quite well that serving tea was hardly impressive. Just the same, I felt as if I was helping out in a way, and that was a nice feeling. Then Hijikata-san spoke, and his words brought me back to the present.
ヤギさんたちにも世話になったが、この豚書もそろそろ手狭になってきたか。
まあ確かに狭くなったな。大使の数も増えてきたしよ。
広いところに移れるんならそれがいいんだけどな。雑魚寝してる連中かなり辛そうだしよ。
だな。前川邸で寝起きしてる連中なんて毎晩押し寿司みてえになりながら寝てやがるぜ。あれじゃ疲れが取れねえだろうし、なんとかしてやりてえよな。
そんなこと言ったって僕たち新選組を受け入れてくれる場所なんてないでしょ。
He's right!
僕たち今日の嫌われ者だしね。
A person sitting beside Kondo-san pointed at the map spread upon the table.
西本願寺というのはどうかしら。
西本願寺ですと、先方の同意を得られるとは思えませんが。
でも 数百人の大使が寝起きできるほど広い場所なんて他にないでしょ。それにあの場所ならいざという時も動きやすいと思うのだけど。
This man was named Kashitaro Ito, recruited by Heisuke a few months ago. There's a car. Excuse you, car. You can't go beep. Anyway, this man was named Kashitaro Ito, recruited by Heisuke a few months ago as the Shinsengumi's military advisor and deputy commander. He developed his notoriety teaching Hakushin Ito at his dojo, and he is known for his scholarliness.
それに西本願寺は以前長州浪士をかくまっていたこともあると聞きますわ。我々が西本願寺に移れば浪士たちは身を隠す場所を一つ失うことになります。
そこまで考えての選定というわけですか。なるほど。
Kondo-san seemed very impressed by Ito's suggestion, but a silent voice of protest arose.
僧侶の動きを武力で押さえつけるのはいかがなものかと思いますが。
Ito-san's brow twitched as if disturbed by the idea, and he faced Sanan-san directly.
自社を隠れ蓑にして好き勝手な振る舞いをしていたのは長州浪士の方ではなくて、今日の治安を乱す不逞浪士に配慮して差し上げるなんて、三男さんもお優しいこと。
Ito's sense deflection of Sanan-san's words left a bitter taste in everyone's mouth, including Sanan-san. Ito, it's a kitsune!
尊上過激派を抑える必要があるという点に関しては同意しますが。
じゃあなんだ、切り合うときはやあやあ我こそはって名乗りを上げて正々堂々とやるべきだとでも言うつもりか。不逞浪士どもがそんな鎌倉武士みたいなご作法に付き合ってくれりゃいいがな。
三郎、口を慎みなさい。
もっと悪い、つい本音が出た。
The other man besides Ito was Saburo Miki, who joined at the same time as Ito. Allegedly, he was Ito-san's younger brother by blood.
皆さん方ごめんなさいね。この子は昔から口が悪くて。
I wonder how old Miki is compared to Ito.
三男さんもお気を悪くなさらないでくださいな。あなたのような方も新選組を大きくしていく上では必要だと思いますし、たとえ左腕が使い物にならなくとも、その才覚と学識は隊のために大いに役立つはずですわ。
I watched the Sana-san bit his lip, an act of restraint at Ito-san's sour words. The tension was cut by another voice.
伊藤さん、今のはどういう意味だ。
Hijikata-san's voice was cold and sharp, like the sound of a blade sliding across a whetstone. Ito-san seemed taken aback and his eyes grew wide.
あんたが言うように、三男さんは優秀な論客だ。けどな、剣客としてもこの新選組に必要な人間なんだよ。
Hijikata-san only spoke when necessary, so it must have been something he truly believed. However,
ですが、私の腕は。
he couldn't even seem to bring himself to finish. It seemed as though Hijikata-san realized his words were reminding Sanan-san of what he used to be, causing Sanan-san to curl his lips into a frown.
ごめん遊ばせ。私としたことが失言でしたわ。三男さんは皆さん方の大切なお仲間ですものね。仲がよろしくて結構なことですわ。新たに入隊した大使たちも同じ気持ちでいてくれるといいのですけど。
Hijikata-san's eyes seethed with anger towards Ito-san. Kondo-san tried to relieve the tension by stepping in and clearing the air.
とりあえず豚書移転の件に関してはもう少し話し合ってから決めるということで。伊藤さん、この後お付き合いを願えますかな。先ほどの件についてもう少し詳しい話をお聞きしたいので。
ええ、喜んで。
Seeing the two get up, Takeda followed right behind them.
近藤局長、私もご一緒して構いませんか？
いいとも。ぜひ君も伊藤さんの話を聞いて大いに見識を広めてくれたまえ。新選組幹部といえど剣術ばかりではいかんからな。これからは広い視野と深い知識を身につけねばな。
は。
Kono-san left the common room with Ito-san and Miki. However, who still sat before us. He smirked coldly towards us and he slinked off to leave the common room. Okata spoke once Miki's footsteps weren't audible.
まったく誰なのさ、あんな人たちを連れてきたのは。
犯人はまだ江戸にいるだろう。平助の野郎、帰ってきたらとっちめてやる。
伊藤さんは尊上派なんだろう。長州の奴らと同じ考えの奴がよく新選組に入る気になったもんだな。
But you know one and are friends with one!
尊皇攘夷だからって長州と同一視されるのは心外らしい。そもそも尊皇とはとかなんとかわけのわからねえことを抜かしてやがったんだよ。近藤さんも近藤さんであっさり丸め込まれやがって。
近藤さんってお人よしですからね。ああいう口がうまくてお腹の中が真っ黒な人に騙されやすいんだよな。
その伊藤さんが参謀で弟が9番組組長か。めんどくさいことになったぜ。
Eventually, Hijikata-san approached Sanan-san, who weakly hung his head, facing the floor in shame.
三男さん、あんな奴の言うことなんざ気にするんじゃねえぞ。
Sanan-san laughed dryly and shook his head.
伊藤さんは学識も高く弁舌に優れ、剣の腕も確かな方ですよ。
What? No, Nani? Never mind. False alarm!
優秀な参謀の入隊で、ついに総長はお役御免というわけですね。
おい、三男さん。
Sanan-san left the room as Hijikata-san's voice trailed behind, echoing in the hall.
三男さんも気の毒にな。あの調子だから近頃は大使連中にも避けられちまってる。
What? But why?
無理もねえだろう。どんな言葉をかけても全部悪く取られちまうし、何を言っても皮肉と嫌味しか返ってこねえから、大使たちも怯えちまって近づかねえんだよ。
Oh no, poor Sanan-san. Even though I haven't been here as long as the captains, I knew Sanan-san was so well liked by the other warriors before his injury.
土方さん、伊藤さんたちなんて適当な理由をつけてさっさと追い出しちゃってくださいよ。あの人たちが来てから僕、毎晩嫌な夢ばっかり見るんですよね。
Did he say Viva? Maybe.
そんなことできるわけねえだろうが。近藤さんはすっかり伊藤さんに心酔してるみてえだしな。伊藤さんと一緒に入隊してきた連中もそんな扱いをされりゃ黙っちゃいねえだろう。
役に立たない人だな。無理を通すのが鬼副長の役目でしょ。
んじゃてめえが副長やりゃいいだろうが。で、あいつらを追い出せ。
嫌に決まってるじゃないですか、そんなめんどくさいの。
The consensus was that Ito-san was not to be trusted, and it seemed like no one spoke in his defense. Only one, during all of this, quietly sipped his tea. No. Sato-san quietly looked up at me as I poured more tea into his cup. So, what do you think about Ito-san? About Ito-san joining, that is.
さまざまな考えを持つ者が属してこそ、タイというのは広がりを見せるものだ。
So then.
だが無理に広げようとすると、内部から瓦解を始めることもある。
His words hung in the air, a dark omen for the future of the Shinsengumi. It was considerate of Ito-san to join, but his presence seemed to be a recipe for dissension, if not outright disaster. The setting sun glowed through the windows with a warm, rich maroon, an ominous kind of beauty. It's cold. I came out into the yard and my body stopped due to the cold. Guess spring will take a while. I wasn't too fond of Ito-san, but it was Sanan-san and his condition that truly worried me. I really wish his arm would just heal. That arm, or perhaps more accurately the lack of it, was the source of his change in personality. Still, as nice as it would be for Sanan-san's arm to simply start working again, that seemed like the stuff of a child's fable, not real life. That was when I remembered.
薬でも何でも使ってもらうしかないですね。三男さんも納得してくれるんじゃないかな。
そうじ。めったなこと言うもんじゃねえ。幹部が羅刹になってどうするんだよ。
Okuta was talking about the Shinsengumi having some secret serum back in the day. Judging from how they spoke of it, it's an item with circumstances. And I was not to know about the existence of that serum. If I were to look into it without approval, there was no doubt that I'd be punished. But I'm the daughter of a doctor. I'm pretty sure I had more knowledge in medicine than the men of the Shinsengumi did. I returned to my room. Perhaps it would be best to just return to my room. I didn't want to get in trouble for wandering around, but most of all, I didn't want to find myself in anyone's way. Even though I was worried about Sanan-san, maybe it's for the best for me to stay out of the way. Just as the sun dipped below the horizon, the compound exploded with activity. My worry increased tenfold. Did something happen? I waited for a few moments for the activity to settle down, but it did no such thing. Something was wrong. I could feel it. I struggled against it for as long as I could, but eventually my curiosity got the better of me. There must be someone in the common room. I decided to ask someone what had happened.
まさか三男君が自ら薬に手を出してしまうとは。
たく、どいつもこいつも何してやがるんだ。三男さんから目を離すなってあれだけ言ったじゃねえか。
んなこと言われてもよ、薬を飲むとは思わねえだろ普通。あれを管理してたのは三男さんだったから、薬を持っててもおかしくはねえし。
小瓶一つぐらいなら懐に隠し持ってても気づかなかっただろうしな。確かにあの薬を使えば腕は治るかもしれねえだろうが、あれは失敗作なんだろう。飲んだ連中もみんな結局は血に狂っちまった。ってことは三男さんは。
I wonder what they meant by treatment. Occasionally I'd heard the captains referring to something similar from time to time. So, did Sun drink that thing?
三男総長は独自に薬の改良を続けていたと聞きます。理性を保ったまま腕の傷を治す。その成功にかけたのでしょうが、失敗を悟った三男総長は掃除の静止を聞かず自陣した。
Ah, shit. I'll be right back. The phone is ringing. Alright, the phone call is done with. Back to our regularly scheduled program. Suicide? The words were past my lips before I'd even thought them. As one, all eyes in the room turned towards me.
どうしてお前がここにいる?
The longer his cold gaze kept me pinned, the tighter my throat became, until I could barely breathe, let alone speak. I felt a strange combination of anxiety, suspicion, and animosity that I had felt before on the night I arrived at the headquarters of the Shinsengumi. Now, as then, I knew the meaning of that gaze.
トシ、そろそろ彼女にも聞いてもらった方がいいんじゃないか。彼女はコードーさんの娘だ。知る権利はあるだろう。
I felt my eyes go wide at the mention of my father's name. Why would my father's name come up here? Don't tell me he had something to do with this? Hijikata-san's gaze slid to Kondo-san, sporting an unpleasant grimace. After a moment, however, he gave a long, exasperated sigh and turned back to me.
先に言っておく。お前は新選組に必要ねえ人間だ。コードーさんを探す役には立つかもしれねえが、お前がいなくてもどうってことはねえ。もしおかしな真似をすれば即座に殺す。そいつをてめえの肝にしっかり命じてから話を聞け。
The intensity of Hijikata-san's statement felt like a sharp dagger pointed at my throat. I'm the daughter. The Shinsengumi only let me stay with them, and the slight chance I'd come in handy when the time arose to search for my father. Although it wasn't their primary duty, the Shinsengumi had the watch for all manhunts. There's nothing left to tie me here, apart from my memories of the last year. Are you going to kill me? My words were flushed with worry, and Hijikata-san thinned his eyes like he was speaking to a servant.
まだ殺さねえよ。もっとも、いつ死のうと困らねえがな。
Oh. I was glad. I suppose that I wasn't going to be killed, but I was still far from happy. I'd been with the Shinsengumi for nearly a year. My position with them hadn't changed. The truth cut deep.
今までは君にも伏せていたのだが、コードーさんはもともとここで薬の研究をしていてな。
You mean... I gulped audibly, and I carefully formulated what I was going to say in my head before I said it aloud. The one that Sanon-san took? When Kondo-san nodded, it was as if there was a great weight resting on him.
あの薬はもともと幕府の高官がここに持ち込んだものだ。何でも西洋との交易で手に入れたものだと聞かされている。
Curiosity swelled inside of me, and my head felt light from the anticipation. Still, I knew that digging deep is dangerous. These thoughts swirled.
人間の筋力と自然治癒能力を爆発的に高める西洋トライニ薬。あれを飲んだ者は野生の獣と渡り合うことも不可能ではなくなる。致命傷でなければ傷は立ちどころに塞がる。つまり首を落とされるか心臓を撃たれぬ限り戦い続けることができるのだ。
Does such a concoction really exist? It felt like I was hearing some sort of fairy tale.
ただし、あの薬には甚大な副作用がある。
A price?
あれを飲んだ人間は狂気に駆られ、人の血なしでは生きることさえできなくなるのだ。新選組の大使の実験台に薬の改良を進めていたのはコードーさんだ。
My father? Somewhere deep in my heart, I knew my father had some connection with all of this. Knowing my father was involved with driving men mad, all I could do was wonder why. To perform experiments on the Shinsengumi. So, that night in the alley... Saito-san nodded plainly.
薬を飲んだ大使たちは南部邸にいる。ヤギ邸では人目につくからな。血に触れぬ限り正気を失うことはない。我々にとっては御しやすい者たちだ。
Saito-san spoke quietly and indifferently. It was as if what he talked about was a distant memory. Living with him for so long made me forget. There was still a line between myself and the Shinsengumi men that couldn't be crossed, and his coldness reminded me of this notion.
大丈夫か？顔色悪いぜ。
I'm all right.
無理すんな。こんな話を聞かされりゃ気分も悪くなるよな。
おしゃべりはその辺にしとけ。今は三男さんのことが先だろうが。
つってもどうするんだ。三男さん死にかけてるじゃねえか。あの
薬はここに持ち込まれたばかりの頃とは違う。まだ狂うと決まったわけじゃねえ。薬が効いてるんならどんな怪我でも治るはずだからな。
Hijikata-san felt like he was restrained in saying this, as if he was trying to keep his hopes low.
近藤さん、あんたは三男さんの様子を見てきてくれるか。今夜生きるか死ぬか狂うかの瀬戸際だろうから。
うん、行ってこよう。確か彼の部屋には掃除もいるのだったな。
Kono-san nodded deeply, then stood and walked towards the room.
三男さんの部屋へは誰も近づけるな。特に伊藤派の連中はな。
ああ、分かってる。
新橋、前川邸の様子を見てきてくれるか。
分かった。
As he passed, Nagakura's eyes met mine for an instant, and his gaze... In them I saw the same hostility I felt on the night I'd first arrived, and they were filled with doubt and suspicion towards me.
斉藤は中庭で待機しろ。伊藤一派の警戒と牽制を頼む。御意。
Eventually, Hijikata-san faced his gaze to me.
雪村、お前も今夜は幹部のそばにいる。
It seemed as though his suggestion wasn't out of worry for my well-being, but rather that it wasn't a wise idea for me to be wandering around.
裏の南部邸には絶対に行くんじゃねえぞ。連中、夜は気が立ってるからな。
Alright. I bowed slightly, but even with their warnings, I would be limited. Where should I go? We remain in the common room. Saito-san, Harada, and Nagakura had respectively left for the locations at the bequest of Hijikata-san's command, which meant I was alone with Hijikata-san. Maybe it was because Hijikata-san remained silent, but the mood in the common room felt suffocating. Of course, I bore no ill will, but we were left to contemplate his somber silence together. My eyes slowly drifted to Hijikata-san, and his brows furrowed into deep indents above drooping eyes. One could see that his heavy concern for Sanan-san was draining him, and it was only after he closed his eyes to breathe that he quietly spoke.
お前は腐っちまってる姿しか知らねえだろうな。三男さんはもともと才もあり腕も立つ人だ。対局も見えるし頭も回る。つまんねえことにこだわって意地張ってばかりの俺の手綱をうまく取ってくれてな。 人がいなきゃ今の新選組はありえなかった。俺にとっちゃ兄貴みてえなもんだったんだ。
Hijikata-san's sincerity dripped from his curt words, and he balled his hands into tight fists. Sanan-san must have a very special place in your heart.
ま、言葉にすると安っぽくなるかな。
Here he sat, captured by thoughts of a life without his old friend. The truth could be devastating even for Hijikata-san. His position, however, prevented him from revealing this to others, and by sharing these memories with me, he and the truth could wait.
あの薬を捨てちまわなかったのも三男さんの腕を治すためだった。俺たちには三男さんが必要なんだ。あの人を失うわけにはいかねえんだよ。
He scrunched his face heavily, and his usual coldness was dissolving, replaced by an anguish as he considered the mortality of his dear friend. He is completely spent. Let's have faith. Let's have faith in Sanan-san's spirit and strength.
ああ、そうだな。今は信じるしかねえよな。
And so the long night broke. The captains of the Shinsengumi gathered in the common room.
みんな安心してくれ。峠は越えたようだよ。
The room collectively breathed a sigh of relief.
で、どうなんだ三男さんの様子は。
今はまだ寝てる。静かなものだよ。
今までの大使たちみてえになっちまってるのか、それとも。
Inoue simply shook his head.
確かなことは目を覚ますまでわからんね。見た目は昨日までと変わらないんだが。
Suddenly then the door slid open.
おはようございます皆さん。ご機嫌いかがかしら。
うげ、伊藤さん。
うげとはご挨拶ですのね。皆さんお顔の色が優れない様子ですけど。
そりゃ朝っぱらからあんたの顔見たせいに決まってるだろうが。
まあ長倉君ったら冗談がお上手ですこと。
Ito-san dismissed Nagakura's snide remark, and he turned to face the standing warriors.
皆さんの顔色がよろしくないのは、もしかして昨晩の騒ぎと関わりがあるのかしら。
あ、いや、その、だな。
Desperately, Kono-san's eyes flew around the room as if looking for someone to offer an excuse.
よし、ごまかせその。
あ、俺か。実は昨日。
大根役者は出しゃばらないでくれるかな。そういうのだったらもっと得意な人がいるじゃない。
Okitas turned to Saito-san unexpectedly, and the latter spoke up at once.
伊藤参謀がお察しの通り、昨晩屯所内にて事件が発生しました。
まあ、事件ですって。
はい。ですが我々もまだ全容を把握できてはいない状況です。今の時点での説明は余計な誤解を招くばかりかと。ですので今夜にでも場を設け、詳しくお伝えさせていただきたく存じます。
そういうことですの。事情は分かりましてよ。今夜のお呼ばれ、心待ちにしていますわ。では、ごめん遊ばせ。
Ito brandished another strange smile, stood, nodded, and left the room promptly.
なんとか見逃してもらえたみたいだね。
What do you mean?
伊藤さんはなんだかんだで頭が回る人だからな。幹部が勢ぞろいしてる場に三男さんだけいねえんだ。あの人絡みで何かあったってことぐらいすぐ感づくだろ。
Ito-san had likely guessed what took place, but decided not to press the issue. I had looked up just in time to see Sanan-san shuffle through the door. Sanan-san!
そんな化け物を見るような目で見られても困りますよ。
三男さん、起きてていいのかい？
少し気だるいですがね。これも薬の副作用でしょう。あの薬を飲んでしまうと昼間動くことが困難になりますから。
Sanan-san looked a little pale, but it didn't look too difficult for him to stand and speak. But if it's hard for him to move during the day...
私はもう人ではありません。
Those words sunk our hearts heavily. Even the captains fell silent to his solemn admission.
いや、三男君、君が生きていてくれてよかった。我々はそれだけで十分だと思う。
Kondo-san stood and grabbed Sanan-san's shoulders tightly, his expression bright and endearing. Tears nearly welled in his beaming eyes.
それで腕の方はどうなんです？治ったんですか？
まだ本調子ではありませんからね。自分でもよくわからないのですね。
He lifted his left arm, the arm that before had hung limp at his side, and flexed his hand. It didn't look any different than before his injury.
治っているようですね。少なくとも不便がない程度には。
Thank goodness. In spite of the chaos from last night, his wish to use his arm once more came true. However,
あの薬を飲んだってことは昼間動けねえようになっちまったんだろう。それなのにタイムに参加なんてできるのか？
his voice was calm, almost careless.
解決策はあります。私が死んだことにすればいい。これから私は薬の成功例として羅刹を束ねていこうと思っています。
サンナさん、それ本気で言ってるのか？あんた自分が何を言ってるのか分かってるのかよ？
分かっていますとも。長倉君、君こそ忘れたのですか？我々は薬の存在を伏せるよう幕府から命じられているのですよ。私が死んだことにすれば今までのように薬の存在を隠し通すことができる。それにもし薬の持つ副作用を消すことができるのだとすれば、それを使わない手はないでしょう。
They seemed to be against Sanan-san's idea, though no one said anything. Who would want to co-assign a friend to a life of secrecy, lived in the shadows? But
薬の実験は幕府からのお達しでもあるしな。そうするしかないか。
まあ三男さんが自分で選んだ道ですし、止めたって聞く人じゃないですよね。
よくわかっていますね。その通りですよ。
Hijikata-san scoffed at Sanan-san's suggestion, and bitterness frothed from his words.
短所移転の話、冗談じゃ済まされなくなった。三男さんを伊藤派の目から隠すには広い短所が必要だ。ここじゃ狭すぎる。
同意します。薬の研究を続けるのであれば なおのこと移転を急ぐべきかと。
よし、ろくに寝てねえとこ悪いが話し合いを始めさせてもらうぜ。雪村、お前は部屋に戻ってろ。ろくに寝てねえだ。
Understood. Please excuse me. I bowed to everyone and left the common room. I'm happy that Senasan was safe, but a whole flurry of new concerns arose. Learning of my father's horrible work, what will become of me? Will I be safe? Such thoughts buzzed heavily in my head as I walked back to my room. June 1865. Our emperor had passed, and our year moved from the 2nd of Ganji to the 1st of Kyo. It was 3 months since we'd moved the headquarters to Nishihowanji. There's a lot more room, but more room meant, well, farther to walk. I'd walked through it almost every day for weeks, and I was finally beginning to learn my way around. As I turned a corner near the back of the compound, I caught sight of someone sitting in the shadows. There you are, Sanan-san. Your food's ready.
Ah, 君でしたか。ありがとう。
The snow disappeared, the cherry blossoms bloomed and fled, and now the swallows and the heat came. Sanan-san and I exchanged a pair of smiles, and I held out my hands to let the breeze brush across them. It's really gotten warm lately.
ええ。まあ、今の私には風より日差しの強さの方が勘に触りますがね。
Really? I didn't think the sun was particularly strong that day, but the Sanan-san who hid in the shadows and out of sight during the day, it must have been unbearable. Thinking back to the night of the incident, I remember Sanan-san transformed into a being with white hair, eyes lusting for blood. But looking at his peaceful smile now made it hard to imagine such a night was real. If someone told me it was all a bad dream, I would have believed it. It wasn't a dream, though, and now Sanan-san spends his days hiding from the sunlight and from others. I have definitely tapped into the Shinsengumi secrets. For just a moment, the sun lit on Sanan-san's hair. I don't know if it was a trick of the light or simply my mind being foolish, but in that moment, his hair was a brilliant white.
どうかしましたか？幽霊でも見るような目つきで人を見るのは良いこととは思えませんが。
No, nothing at all. He looked perfectly normal now, of course. Surely, I thought, I must have simply imagined it. Sanan-san had become the same creature as the men I encountered on my first night in Kyoto. And here, right in front of me, he stood. The fear of the night cast a shadow over my heart. It was unnerving. Heisuke and I made our way through the crowded as usual streets of Kyoto at a brisk pace. You know, I haven't gone out on patrol with you in quite a while, Heisuke.
ああ、そうかもな。俺、長いこと江戸に行ってたし。俺の留守中どうだった？新八さんとか佐野さんにいじめられたりしなかったか？
Everything was fine, and they were kind to me.
そっか。ならいいけど。親父さんの行方はどうなんだ？手がかりとか見つかったか？
None at all.
やっぱ見つからねえか。 俺も江戸に戻った時、お前の家の様子を見に行ってみたんだけどな。人が戻ってきた様子はなかったし、ほんとどこに行っちまったんだろうな。
The somberness of Heisuke's expression started to rub off on me. Now I was depressed. Thank you for taking the time to look anyway.
いや、別に礼を言われるようなことじゃねえって。そもそもお前が今みてえに自由に外に出られねえのも、元はといえば俺たちの。
Heisuke? Heisuke stopped himself mid-sentence, which was jarring. Ever since he returned from Edo, he's looked glum. Heisuke? How about you? It's been a while since you were in Kyoto. Does it seem different from Edo?
そうだな。街も人も結構変わった気がする。
I wonder what was going through his head. Did something happen to him in Edo? His sudden change of character confused me. Heisuke's head jerked up slightly, and he looked across the street. He stood on his toes and waved.
おい、ソジ、そっちの様子はどうだった？
特に何も。いつも通りだね。
Okita was out on patrol as well, although his route took him through a different part of the city.
でも、将軍上洛の時には忙しくなるんじゃないかな。
The Shogun's coming to visit Kyoto?
そう。近藤さんも張り切ってるよ。近藤さん、家持公のことをすごく尊敬してるから。
Ah, I see. I hope it turns out well. Right, Heisuke?
ああ、まあ、近藤さんはそうだろうな。
Something had really gotten into him. I glanced at Okita to see if he noticed anything. Okita? Are you alright?
平気だよ。ちょっと風邪をひいちゃったみたい。
Ah, I see. Well... Hey, y'all came back. Well, please take care of yourself. I have medicine to treat colds, so I'll give you some when we return.
そう。ありがとう。君でもごくたまに役に立つことがあるんだね。
What's the matter? Okita's eyes looked past me and suddenly something caught his attention off to the side.
おい小娘、断るとはどういう了見だ？
やめてください。話して。
民草のために日々上位を論ずる我ら志士に尺の一つや二つ自分からするのが当然であろうが。
Across the street, a clump of perhaps 3 or 4 men were harassing a young girl. Okita! Heisuke!
分かってるって。お前はここで待ってろ。
But it appeared that Okita had got to them first.
やれやれ。上位って言葉も君たちに使われるんじゃかわいそうだよ。
The usual crowds shuffled away from Okita and the men quickly as they could. No one wanted to be near the side of unsheathed blades. The Ronin's eyes found Okita's jacket and the men stiffened.
その羽織、新選組か？
知ってるなら話が早いな。どうする？
His lips curled into a predatory smile as his hand gripped his sword. There was no mirth in that rictus grin, and the Ronin's face grew much paler. Their moods were not totally deflated yet, as their ringleader made one more attempt.
くそ、幕府の犬が。
いいからとっとと失せろって。
The sight of two Shinsengumi blue jackets standing shoulder to shoulder was enough to deter the men. The last of the color drained from their faces, and they turned tail and ran.
俺たちを見てとっとと逃げ出すぐらいなら最初からあんな真似するなっての。
You aren't going to go after them? Arrest them?
どんな罪で？君って意外と過激だな。
I didn't really mean it like that.
助けてくださってありがとうございました。私、南雲薫と申します。
I watched as the girl gave Okita a quick bow. She was so refined, so ladylike. Even dressed like a girl, I doubted I could ever be as elegant as her. I'd only just begun to feel sorry for myself when suddenly I felt a hand on my arm. Okita!
いいから、この子の横に立って。
He shoved me next to the girl we just rescued, then stepped back to stroke his chin thoughtfully. No. Okita? I glanced nervously towards the girl and attempted to smile kindly under the circumstances. The smile she gave me in return was beautiful, but there was something about it that seemed odd. She seems familiar.
やっぱりよく似てるね、二人とも。
We look alike? That's when I finally realized she was identical to whom I saw in the mirror.
そっか。俺は全然似てないと思うけどな。
いや、似てるよ。きっとこの子が女装したらそっくりになると思うな。
沖田さん、この方困ってらっしゃいますよ。
I had to say something, but what? Perhaps she saw through my confusion, or perhaps it was something else.
きちんとお礼をしたいのですけれど、今は所用がありまして。ご無礼、ご容赦くださいね。このご恩はまたいずれ。新選組の沖田総司さん。
With that, the girl who called herself Kaoru disappeared into the crowds of Kyoto, although the uneasiness created by her presence remained.
おいおい、ありゃ掃除に気でもあるんじゃねえの？
今のがそう見えたんなら、平助は一生佐野さんに勝てないよね。
どういう意味だよ？
Their back and forth continued, but my mind was elsewhere. Last night's rain left a number of puddles on the road, and when I looked into them, I saw a strange girl who looked just like me. Kaoru, huh? Wind caught the surface of the puddle, sending a flurry of ripples across it. Alright, I'm coming! I turned and ran towards Heisuke and Okita, already on their way back to headquarters. Stretchy. I will be right back again. I have 0 water in this water bottle. Alright, we're back and we have fresh water. The temple was much larger than the compound in Mibu, as advertised. The whole Shinsengumi could gather in the common room with space to spare. As Kondo-san spoke, his voice echoed grandly throughout the hall. Standing before Kondo-san were the many proud men under the leadership with glowing expressions.
皆も徳川第14代将軍徳川家茂公が上洛されるという話は聞き及んでいると思う。その上洛に伴い公が二条城に入られるまで新選組総力をもって警護の任に当たるべしとの要請を受けた。
将軍公の警護を新選組が？
こりゃとんでもねえ大出世だな。
池田屋や金門の変の活躍でお偉いさん方も俺たちの働きを認めざるを得なかったんだろうよ。
警護中は文字通り僕らの刀に国の行く末がかかってるってことですか？
そういうことだ。てめえら気合い入れていけよ。
将軍公の警護とはまた大役ですな。
ええ、本当に三男さんが生きていればどれほどお喜びになったことか。本当に惜しい方を亡くしましたわね。
Ito-san wiped crocodile tears away from his eyes with a silk handkerchief. Ito-san and his followers were told Sanon-san died. In fact, the entire incident surrounding his transformation had been covered up. Only a few of the men of the Shinsengumi knew the truth.
伊藤さん、こたびの幕命を立派に成し遂げることこそ亡くなった三男君が真に望んでいることだと思います。
ええ、分かっていますわ。私たちの名を天下に広く知らしめる絶好の機会ですものね。
ともあれ、これから忙しくなりますな。
まずはタイの編成を考えねば。とりあえず俺とトシ、それからソウジ。
待ってくれ近藤さん。ソジは今回外してやってくれねえか。
なぜ
だ？なんでも風邪が治らねえとかでな。養生しろって散々言ってるのによ。
本当か？大丈夫なのかソジ？
大した風邪じゃないんですけどね。土方さんは大げさなんですよ。
何言ってやがるんだ。さっきも咳してただろうが。
それ薬を売りつけるための工場ですか？何を言われても石田三役は買いませんよ。
そんなんじゃねえよ。いいから言う通りにしろ。
I gave Oki to some pretty strong medicine not too long ago. I wonder if that didn't work. Or maybe he doesn't have a cold, but rather he's inhaling dust from the lack of cleaning here? Then suddenly someone raised his hand.
平介、どうしたんだね。何か気になることでもあるのか？
あのさ、近藤さん。実は俺もちょっと調子が。
なんだ、平介も風邪か？気をつけないといかんぞ。せっかくの晴れ舞台、全員揃って家持公をお迎えしたかったのだがな。
すいません。
ああ、いや、責めたわけではないんだ。体調は大事だからな。いずれまた機会もあるであろうし、二人にはその時存分に働いてもらいたい。
Kondo-san and Hijikata-san continued to discuss their formation, but suddenly Hijikata-san turned to me.
そういや雪村、お前はどうするんだ？ほうけてるんじゃねえよ。お前は警護に参加するのかって聞いてんだ。
I can go too?
無論構わんとも。君も今や新選組の一員と言っても過言ではない。ぜひ参加してくれ。
Could I really go? I hesitated for a moment, confused, and Okita laughed.
まあ行ってもいいんじゃない？そんなに危険もなさそうだしね。
長州藩士は今日に出入りできねえから切った張ったの騒ぎにはならねえだろうし。
What should I do? I'm just a little concerned about a person like me who's not a warrior coming along, but I was feeling emotionally strained with no leads of my father turning up on rounds. I'll go.
よし、わかった。お前には伝令やら使いっ走りを頼むことになると思うがな。こき使ってやるから覚悟しとけ。
In the early days of the Tokugawa shogunate, Nijo Castle was a place for the shogun to stay on his way to the capital. It's been a while since the shogun actually stayed in it, though. We met the shogun on the road and began our escort to about 30 minutes earlier and arrived at the castle relatively recently. By now, I imagined, Kondo-san, Nakakura, Inoue-san, and the men were greeting the officials and other important people in the shogun's fuck it. Well, I've got a job to do too. It was my job to tell soldiers when to change shifts and to carry messages back and forth. A glorified errand girl, in other words. I don't see myself as being useless though, I think. I've come with a message.
なんだ、お前が伝達係かよ。ここは遊び場じゃねえんだぜ。
Well, I'm not here to play.
へえ、そうかよ。じゃあまともな刀も刺してないお前が何しに来てるんだ？
I've come here to do what I can do. Would you mind if we stopped playing games?
言ってみろ。
The chief is currently going around paying his respects to the people in the castle. Everyone else continue with the guard.
わかった。確かに伝達は聞いたぜ。
Huh? That's it? It's that simple?
おい。なんだそのバカ面は。俺が伝達を聞いたのがそんなにおかしいか？
Oh, well, no, I just...
仕事は仕事だからな。市場を挟むつもりはねえんだよ。ほら、伝達は聞いたんだ。さっさと行け。
Okay. Miki and I never really got on the best of terms, but maybe he's a responsible person? After he shooed me away, I continued attending to my duties as a messenger. In the surroundings of Nijo Castle, I can see the warriors wearing a white uniform, which was different than the afternoon uniform. They don't seem too nervous. But I guess it makes sense. Some of the Imperial Nationalist extremists were driven out of Kyoto, and many warriors fled. There's no way anything would happen. A sudden chill ran down the length of my spine. I froze. No, roll the chair, go the other way. Other way, please. Thank you. I knew the feeling. A length of cold steel seeking entry into your flesh, eyes shining with a lust for blood and violence. Since I began living with the Shinsengumi, I felt it more than once. Bloodlust. My eyes were drawn to the roof where no one would think to look. A large wall cast a shadow, shielding a section of the roof from the moonlight. There they stood. You!
気づいた。さほど鈍いというわけでもないよ。
They looked very distinctive, unlike any soldiers I'd seen before. But 3 sets of piercing eyes scattered my thoughts, making it hard to think. I had recognized them. Now I had to put names to faces. Chika Kazama. Kyuji Amagiri. Kyo Shiranui. They were connected to both the Satsuma and the Choshu, and they made an effort to impede the Shinsengumi at Ikeda and again at Hamaguri. Why are you here?
そのなぜっつうのはどうやってここに立ち入ったかを聞いてやがんのか。だったら答えは簡単だ。俺ら鬼の一族には人間が作る障害なんざ意味をなさねえんだよ。
我々はある目的のためにここに来た。君を探していたのです。
What? My heart was pounding so hard it could burst. Why do these men know my name? I don't understand. A demon? What do you mean? And what are you here for? No, you must be joking.
鬼を知らぬだ。本気で言っている。
He stepped forwards, cloaked in shadows. When Amagiri spoke, it was calm and peaceful, as if he were reasoning with a frightened child.
君は負った傷がすぐに癒えませんか？
I held my breath.
波の人間とは思えぬほど怪我の治りが早くありませんか？
How does he know my secret? I've never revealed it to anyone before. Well, Words struggled to come to mind, and just as I was about to deny their accusations.
ああ？なんなら血ぶちまけて証明した方が早いか？
Shiranui's gun glistened eerily.
貴様、貴重な女鬼に傷を負わせるつもりか。
んなこと言われても、こいつの往生際が悪いんだからしょうがねえだろうが。
After Kazuma glared at Shiranui, his eyes drifted towards the kodachi on my hip again.
鬼を示す生徒、東の鬼が持つ小太刀。証拠としては十分です。
My family name? What was wrong with Yukimura? I didn't understand what he was saying, and the cold sweat started inching down my spine.
言っておく。お前を連れて行く同意な。女鬼貴重だ。共に来い。
His hand stretched out from the darkness, pale and grasping like the tentacles of some hideous subterranean monster. Then a blade flickered through the night.
おいおい、合いびきならもう少し色気のある場所を選んだ方がいいんじゃねえか。
またお前たちか。田舎の犬は目端だけは聞くと見える。
それはこちらのセリフだ。
Harada! Saita-san! My legs almost collapsed, as if the now shattered tension was the only thing keeping me standing. I teetered backwards, my balance momentarily lost. A strong, sinewy hand caught me and pulled me back, its grip hard as steel.
下がってろ。
Hijikata-san. One hand guided me around behind him, as the other drew his sword.
将軍の首でも取りに来たかと思えば、こんなガキ一人に一体何の用だ。
将軍も貴様らも今はどうでもいい。これは我ら鬼の問題だ。
鬼だと。
His eyes narrowed. Hijikata-san seemed perplexed by Kazuma's statement, as if contemplating the possibility of its truth.
こいつの面を拝むのは金門の変以来だな。
腐れんってとこか？大して嬉しくもねえがな。
再会という意味ではこちらも同じくだ。だが何の考えもわかんな。
我々の邪魔立てをするつもりですか？ ならば
The tension was so thick in the air that I could scarcely breathe. There they were, a powder keg ready to explode. Even the slightest movement could set them off. It wasn't like I could do much. But I still wanted to help them, so I grabbed my sword.
副長たちの心配は無用だ。
Yamazaki? When did you...
副長の命だ。君はこのまま俺が屯所まで連れて行く。
Then, you're telling me to run away?
その通りだ。君がここにいてもできることは何もない。
I mean, he may be right, but... Go back to headquarters. Even as I ran back to the headquarters with Yamazaki, I couldn't shake the fear in my heart. When I finally got to the compounds, I still felt nervous, and I could do nothing but stare into the blank darkness behind me.
もう大丈夫だ。さすがにここまで追ってはこれまい。
You're right. You're right. I mean, we're pretty far. And besides, you're with me, Yamazaki-san.
信頼してくれてありがとう。だが、俺は副長たちのところへ戻らなくてはならない。皆将軍校の警護に出ているから、今の屯所に大使はほとんど残っていない。沖田さんか東堂さんのところにいるのがいいだろう。そこが最も安全だ。
Understood.
では、後のことは頼んだぞ。
With that, he disappeared back into the darkness. Suddenly, the night felt very quiet. The word demon echoed through my head, and their faces floated in front of my eyes. I shook my head. As the temple came back into focus, I felt very, very alone. As Yamazaki-san said, I should go find Okita Heisuke. But whom should I look for? Hey! Oh, Okita. It's Okita.
あれ
Okita looked up from cleaning his sword as I entered the hall.
二条城に行ってるんじゃなかったっけ？どうしたの？一人で。
Well,
あ、わかった。さては何か失敗して土方さんに追い返されたんでしょ。
something like that.
あのさ、そんな引きつった顔で返事されても全然からかいがいがないんだけど。
That's what you're worried about, Okita. Huh?
何があったのか聞かせてくれるかな。
Well, still feeling upset, I told Okita about the incident that unfolded in Ninjo Castle. The minute I mentioned Kazuma's name, Okita's eyes lit up.
へえ、そうなの。風間千景。あいつが来てたんだ。あいつらが来るって分かってれば、意地でも言ったんだけどな。
What? Of course he could have. No, you're sick. Hijikata-san told you to rest.
うるさいな。そもそも君が悪いんじゃない。君にもらった薬、全然効か。
Okita! For just a moment, all colors but one faded away. I forgot about demons and castles upon seeing one thing, the sickly red splatter across Okita's hand and mouth. Are you okay? I'll go get someone. Heisuke!
ダメだ!
His voice was rough and strained, but filled with unexpected rage. He wiped the blood from his mouth and glared at me over the top of his hand. From under his bangs, his eyes, burning with anger, nailed me to the floor.
今見たことは忘れて。大丈夫。ただ喉が傷ついただけだよ。
Back when I was in Edo, I was helping my father out at his clinic. There were a few times where I'd see patients who'd cough up blood from coughing too much. But what I just saw was something else. Okta.
聞こえなかった。忘れろって言ったでしょ。
He was so adamant about He was so adamant about me not helping him, so it was difficult to know how to react. What could I tell him? But
もし君がこのことを誰かに言うつもりなら。
Okay. But in the least, please just go to sleep and rest.
しょうがないか。
Okita pouted like a child and unwillingly accepted. The words of the men who claimed to be demons lingered in my heart. There were so many things for me to be worried about. However, more than any of that, I was just worried about the man sick in front of me. I continued to eye Okita, who slept with his back faced towards me as I watched the dawn slowly emerge through the long cold night. Since then... Once the rest of the men returned, there was a meeting among the captains. The subject of that meeting was the three men at Nijo Castle, Chikage Kazuma, Kyuju Amagiri, and Kyo Shiranui. They called themselves demons, and their previous encounters with the Shinsengumi suggested they were somehow involved with the Satsuma and Choshu. The Satsuma were the most powerful domain in the opposition domain, and the Choshu are publicly expressive of their dissent towards the shogunate. The Choshu are essentially enemies of the court. I don't know how the three men are supposedly affiliated with the domains, but it was abundantly clear they are not to be dealt with carelessly. There was another problem, however. Why have they come for me? They said I was one of them, and they knew about my family name and my kodachi. But how? My name is Chizuru Yukimura. I am the daughter of my father and my mother. I am a normal girl, nothing out of the ordinary. But who am I? June 1864. The compound was alive with noise and movement. I passed several soldiers in the halls, each one of them excited about something. What was going on? Ito-san, is something wrong?
どうしたもこうしたもありませんよ。私がなんであんな野蛮人どもと同じ部屋で肌をさらさなくてはならないの？
Ito-san's explanation was useless. I was completely confused. Is there something going on today? Ito-san did his best to collect himself shakily adjusting his hair and clothing before he spoke.
将軍上洛の時に近藤さんと意気投合したお医者様が屯所にいらしてるのよ。大使たちの健康診断を行うとかの名目で。
With a disdainful sniff, he glared pointedly across the hall towards the area he just left. The men were getting physical checkups, that much I knew, given my particular situation. I'd been exempted by the captains, who also gave me special instructions to stay away.
あのハゲ坊主じゃなくてお医者様ったら皆の前で私に着物を脱げとおっしゃるのよ。拒んだら無理やり脱がせようとするし、それにあの大使たちの態度、まるで野獣みたいでしたわ。
Savages seemed a bit strong. At any rate, perhaps I should go see just what a physical entailed. I was a doctor's daughter after all. What's this doctor's name?
確か松本良順とか言ったかしら。
What? Wait, Matsumoto Sensei!
何よその反応。知り合いなの？
When I first came to Kyoto, my plan was to find Matsumoto Sensei. My father told me that I could rely on the man if I ever needed anything. Unfortunately, he was away on business when I had arrived, and after that, I'm going to go watch the physical exams. There was no time to waste.
まあ、あんなところに行きたがるなんて、なんて物好きなのかしら。
Don't know what that was. I think it was a helicopter, maybe. Is this it? I could hear loud voices from inside. Oh! Oh! The scene froze me in place.
よし、次の人。
おう、俺の番だな。一丁頼みます先生。ふっ、どうすか。剣術一筋で鍛えに鍛えたこの体。
新八さんの場合、体は頑丈だもん。見てもらうのは頭の方だよな。
ああ、余計なこと言ってると締めるぞヘスケ。
うん、長倉新八と。よし、問題ない。次。
先生、もっとちゃんと見てくれよ。
いやいや、申し分ない健康体だ。
新八、後ろが使えてるんだからさっさと終わらせろって。
そうじゃなくってよ、もっと他に見るところがあんだろ。鍛え抜かれた鋼のようなこの筋肉とか、仁王像みたいに屈強そうな体型とか。
診察は見てもらうものであって見せつけるものではない。さっさとどけ。
It wasn't difficult to see why Ito-san was desperate to escape. I couldn't imagine him as part of such a display. What should I do? I feel like it's rude to intrude.
雪村君、こんなところでどうかしたのか？
Oh, hi, best boy! Oh, Yamazaki-san. Hello. I heard that Matsumoto-sensei was here. Yamazaki-san didn't look like he was in the mood to tolerate my snooping, so he went to the point.
なるほど。松本先生に何か話があるようだな。君のことはある程度聞いている。事情はおおよそ分かった。だが、診察がなかなか終わらないようだ。俺に任せてくれるか？
What should I do? The correct answer is no, I'll take care of it. Oh, don't worry. It's my own business. I'll take care of it.
そうか。では、何かあったら手伝おう。その時は頼ってくれ。
Thank you so much. Yamazaki-san and I parted ways, and I walked towards the examination room where the doctor worked.
君はもう少し胃腸に気をつけるようにな。この薬を食後に飲むように。今ので薬が切れたか。
I waited outside for Matsumoto-sensei until he stepped out of the examination room. すみません。He looked at me for a moment, his eyes narrowed in curiosity.
薬の補充も兼ねて休憩にしようか。君、ちょっと手伝ってくれるかね。
Of course. What luck. Matsumoto sensei.
松本先生、雪村君。
Oh, Kondo-san.
おお、早速会えたようだな。
はい、おかげさまで。
Oops. What? I was utterly lost. Matsumoto sensei laid a gentle hand on my shoulder.
私は君に会うためにここに来たんだよ。高堂さんの娘さんがここに身を寄せていると近藤さんが教えてくれたんだ。
Oh, そっか。
高堂さんと松本先生が懇意にしていたことは俺も知っていたからな。何か高堂さんの手がかりになればと思い、松本先生が今日に戻ってすぐに連絡を取った。
The Shinsengumi had their own reasons for wanting my father around, but Matsumoto sensei's appearance was still cause for joy. Thank you, both of you. They smiled. Matsumoto sensei then explained he had just barely missed me when he left for Edo as I came to Kyoto. He received all my letters, but once he finally returned, he had no idea where I was, and consequently couldn't find me.
すれ違いだったとはいえ、辛い思いをさせてしまったようだ。君がここにいる事情は分かっておるよ。何か不自由なことはないかね。
No, I'm doing all right. So, Matsumoto sensei, about my father. His face took on a grim cast, and before he even spoke, I knew what his response would be.
残念ながら、私も高堂さんの居場所は知らないんだ。
I see. The defeated tone of my voice surprised me. I suppose on some level, I believe Matsumoto sensei had some miraculous revelation about my father. Foolish of me, of course, but that didn't make the truth any less devastating. Kondo-san simply nodded.
君はここにいることで、あの薬に関わってしまったようだね。あの薬。つまり高堂さんが新選組で行っていた研究のことについてだが。
I knew what he meant. The experiments my father conducted with some strange concoction that could make people go mad. Please tell me about it. I want to know everything my father was doing. He nodded.
高堂さんが幕命を受け、新選組で行っていたのは羅刹を生み出す実験だった。羅刹とはすなわち、鬼神のごとき力と驚異的な治癒能力を持つ人間のことだ。
Furies. This term seems so familiar. Then I realized I'd overheard some of the men talking about it.
掃除。めったなこと言うもんじゃねえ。幹部が羅刹になってどうするんだよ。
ああ、羅刹ってのは薬を飲んだら怪我も治っちまう。
羅刹っていうのはかわいそうな子たちのことだよ。
そしてその羅刹を生み出したのは落ち水という薬だ。これは西洋ではエリクサー、中華では先端と呼ばれるものに値する。つまるところ、不老不死の霊薬みたいなものだ。
Furies. Water of life. It sounded more like something from a fairy tale rather than real life. But there was something in Matsumoto sensei's tone of voice that said he was telling the truth. I've already heard about how it makes you strong and hard to kill. But doesn't it cause so much pain that it makes most people go crazy? And even if you survive that, even then, the smell of blood can make you go crazy again. Matsumoto-sensei nodded slowly, then pinched the bridge of his nose with thumb and forefinger. He looked very tired.
そこまで知っていたのか。
They were human, but not human. Perhaps they were almost entirely different now? I couldn't see how this water of life could ever be used for good. Even if it had healed Sanan-san's arm, he'd suffer greatly in the process. Why? It sounded more like a moan than a question. My father would never want to ruin the life of another. But because of what he'd done, people suffered and some even died. Why was my father doing this? But it wasn't just my father. I was sure no one involved expected such a terrible outcome.
だからこそ両親の呵責に耐えかねた行動さんはここを去ったんだろ
う。しかしあれは幕府が新選組の人材不足を補うために授けてくださった知恵でもあるのです。
The doctor only shook his head.
あの計画は失敗だ。行わない方がいい。幕府も見切りをつけているはずだ。
Kono-san frowned, perhaps unhappy that Matsumoto-sensei would question the shogunate's original decision.
あの薬を飲んだ大使たちがどうなったか、近藤さんもよく知ってるだろう。あの計画は人道的に決して許されるもんじゃない。
Kono-san gave a non-committal grunt and fell silent. I wish Kono-san knew just how dangerous it was to use the water of life, but the shogunate had come to him with a request. Perhaps he couldn't refuse even if he wanted to. Silence felt like a thick blanket.
たとえ将軍校の御殿医を務めておられる方のお言葉といえど、大使でもない方に口を差し挟まれる筋合いはありません。
Sanan-san? His face was pale as moonlight, as if he was a walking corpse. Is it okay for you to be up right now?
三男君、休んでいた方がいいのではないか。顔色が悪いぞ。
ご心配なく。
He bowed quickly, his mouth a compressed line, and turned to regard the doctor with a cool gaze.
我々は我々の裁量で例の薬を有効に活用させていただいています。
しかし危険だ。あの薬は人が扱えるような代物じゃない。
研究は続いています。そしてこの私という成功例もあります。
As Sanan-san did indeed prove, it was possible to drink the water of life and retain your sanity. It just wasn't easy.
一見平気そうに見えるかもしれんが、体のどこかに相当無理をかけていることも考えられるぞ。
私は至って健康ですよ。今後も研究と改良を重ねれば薬の質が上がるのは明白です。
そのためにさらに多くの大使を犠牲にするつもりかね。成功するかどうかもわからん実験に大使を付き合わせるのは生命を冒涜しているとしか思えんが。
彼らは我々の礎となったのです。無駄死にではありません。
しかしだな。
まあまあ、松本先生も三男君も落ち着いて。この話は後日改めてということにしないか。
It was my private opinion that they were unlikely to agree, no matter what time they discussed the subject, but I felt it was polite to keep quiet.
そうだな。わかった。
There seemed to be very little common ground between them, but both arguments had merit. Kono-san had likely seen this as well, and he chose to end things before it got unpleasant.
近藤さんがそうおっしゃるのであれば。
Sanan-san's face betrayed nothing of what he might be thinking, even when the corner of his mouth curled up into the beginning of a smile. He bowed quietly and left as swiftly as he arrived.
そういえば先生、健康診断の方はどうでしたかな。
ああ、それなんだがな。頭を抱えたよ。
それは一体なぜ？
なぜも何も。怪我人や病人を合計したら全大使の3分の1近くになるじゃないか。
What?
なんとじゃないぞ近藤さん。あんたらは今まで何をやってたんだ。切り傷から渋り腹まで、この豚書は病の見本市だぞ。
面目ない。まさかそんなことになっていたとは。
まずは病室を用意してそこに病人を運び込んでくれ。それから豚書を清潔にしてもらわんと話にならん。
承知しました。すぐに取り掛かります。
So we were ordered to clean the entire compound.
ったく、何なんだよ大掃除って。俺は掃除とか整理整頓がこの世で一番嫌いなのによ。
ぐちゃぐちゃ言ってないで、さっさとそこのタンスを持ち上げてくれって。散々自慢してた体力を披露するいい機会じゃねえか。
うわー、ネズミが出た。
落ち着け、大事はない。どうやらそこにある握り飯を餌にしていたようだな。
本当だ。誰だよ、食い残しの握り飯をこんなところに隠してたやつ。
まったく、なぜ私がこのような雑用に駆り出されなければならんのだ。そもそも私は軍略が専門だというのに。
いいじゃねえか。いつも自慢してる甲州流なんちゃらでパパッと終わらせてくれ。
黙れ。私の甲州流軍学はこのようなくだらぬ役目のためにあるものではない。
原田も人が悪いな。こいつが盲信してる時代遅れの兵法なんて、このご時世掃除の役にも立たないだろう。
ミキ君、言葉に気をつけたまえ。確かに洋楽には劣るかもしれんが、甲州流軍学は決して時代遅れではなく。
近藤さんだ。
近藤局長、ご覧ください。先ほどまで足の踏み場もないほどだった部屋が私の指導でここまで。局長は
Takada realized Kono-san was nowhere to be seen and glared at Harada.
引っかかり
原田、貴様、測ったな。
ぶつくさ文句言ったり、ペコペコしたり、怒ったり。忙しいな、あんたも。そうやって相手によってコロコロ態度変えてて疲れねえか。
Hi, everyone. I've washed the rags. Please use this when you wipe the floor.
ありがとうよ。
Despite being upset because of chore duty, the men swiftly cleaned the room as a team. Matsumoto Sensei came the next day to inspect the cleanliness of the compounds.
まあまあ綺麗になったじゃないか。
だろ？この筋肉は飾りじゃねって先生もようやく分かってくれたみてえだな。
人を動かすという点に関しては軍略も掃除もさして変わりませぬゆえ。
あんた文句言ってただけだろう。
でも掃除は一日休んでたんだろ。ずるいよな、みんな頑張ってる時に。
しょうがないじゃない。土方さんが過保護なんだから。
お前が変な咳するからだろうが。養生しねえからいつまでも治らねえんだよ。
しかしやはりこうして片付いていると気分がいいもので
まあな、見違えたもんだ。これはこれで悪くね
え。よし、これからは毎日掃除するか。
おう、頼んだぜ平助。
なんで俺だけなんだよ。体力自慢の新八さんが真っ先に働くべきだろ。
I'll help too, Heisuke.
そっか。そんじゃ明日から二人で頑張ろうな。新八さんなんて放っておいて。
おいおい、ちょっと待てって。誰もやらねえとは言ってねえだろ。
お、そこにまだゴミがあるじゃねえか。ちょうどいい。捨ててこい、新八。
いや、だから明日からだろ。なあ、平助。
片付けたそばから暴れるな。誇りが立つ。
I was enjoying the banter when I noticed something. Oh? I could just see Okita and Matsumoto sensei outside, walking off somewhere together. Where could they be going, I wondered. I'm worried about Okita. Where were Okita and Matsumoto sensei doing? Was Okita going to talk to the doctor about his cough? He was coughing an awful lot lately. Now that I thought about it, was he alright? I decided to follow them. Unfortunately, I waited too long, and by the time I made my way outside, they were gone. I think they went this way.
おや、雪村君、誰かを探しているんですか?
Shimada, have you seen Okita and the doctor?
沖田君たちなら中庭の方に行ったようですが。
Thank you.
急ぎすぎて転ばないよう気をつけてください。それでは、俺はこれで。
Goodbye. I saw him walk off and it got me thinking. The courtyard. Should I try and catch up, or should I go around the back to reach the courtyard before they did? Go around. I ducked into the narrow path that ran around the back, and I soon found myself at the courtyard. I hid myself in the shadows, waiting. Okita and the doctor appeared only moments after I hid silently.
結論から言おう。お前さんの病は老害だ。
For just a second, my heart stopped. A shiver ran down my spine, and suddenly I felt very, very cold.
なんだ、やっぱりあの有名な死病ですか。
Okita has.
でも、面と向かって言われると、さすがに困ったな。
老害の一番の薬は西洋だ。新選組を離れて精のつくものを食べてゆっくり体を休めなきゃいかん。
それはできません。
そうせんと体は悪くなるばかりだぞ。今はそうやって平気なふりができても、いずれ布団から起き上がることすらできなくなる。
じゃあその時までここにいますよ。血を吐きながら、それでも刀を取ります。
なぜそれほどまでここにいたいんだね。
僕は新選組の剣ですから、ここにいることが僕の全てなんです。新選組の前に立ちふさがる敵を切る。ただそれだけなんですよ。
お前さんの覚悟は分かった。
Okita sounded cheery, but I was listening in a state of shock. Okita's going to die? I felt like I wanted to faint, but I stayed strong and remained standing.
先生、近藤さんたちには言わないでくださいよ。約束ですからね。
まあ、どうしても言えないことってのはあるだろうな。私もあの子に打ち明けていないことがあるんだ。 行動さんが上位派の過激浪士連中と行動を共にしてるかもしれんなんてな。とてもじゃないが伝えられんよ。
The news of Ogata's illness had me so scattered, I almost cried out at this new piece of intelligence. My father, working with nationalists? There was suddenly someone behind me. A hand slipped over my mouth before I could react, and a freezing sensation made my spine shiver.
静かにしていろ。
It was a calm, cool voice that I'd heard many times before, although never from quite so close. Saito? My body relaxed, and the body behind me was Saito-san, not some anonymous assailant.
そのまま動くな。掃除は気配に悟い。
I nodded my head as much as I dared. His hand over my mouth made me too nervous to breathe. Saito-san's presence next to me was silent and sharp, like a blade in the night. It seemed like hours passed before Okita and Matsumoto-sensei finally left.
斉藤さんの起点がなければ危ないところでした。
Yamazaki-san! How long was he? No, something told me that would be a foolish question. He was probably watching the whole time. Gomen. If you hadn't stopped me, Sato-san, I probably would have given myself away.
いや、俺の方こそぶしつけな真似をしてしまってすまなかった。掃除に気づかれずに済んだのはあんたのおかげだ。礼を言う。
Oh, no, not at all. There was the briefest hint of a smile in his eyes as he spoke, and then it disappeared.
それで、掃除のことだが、先ほど話していた病の件に関しては、聞かなかったことにしてくれ。
He wasn't asking me to keep my mouth shut per se, but rather to forget what I'd seen and heard had ever happened. But why?
あの方が病に倒れるとなれば、内外に与える影響が大きすぎます。それに、老子たちが勢いづくだけでなく、局長や副長にもご心配をかけるでしょうから。
He was right. Even I could understand that. But I couldn't forget the sight of Okita smiling, even with the seriousness of this news.
病に関しては我々が対処する。あんたが気にすべきことではない。関わるなと言っているのだ。いいな。
At the end of the day, I was still only a guest. The sad reminder resurfaced once more. I may live among the Shinsengumi, but I wasn't one of them. Sato-san's words made that very clear. Suddenly I felt cold, as if a cold gust of wind blew through me, draining all the heat from my body. I was all alone. From then on, Matsumoto-sensei visited the compound regularly to check up on the men of the Shinsengumi. Ever since Sana-san had become the leader of the Furies, the group was named as the Fury Corps. Still, I couldn't help but wonder, was it really alright to continue researching the Furies? My heart was heavy with worry. Without him, the Shinsengumi would be nothing. We would cease to exist. If so, why? Sometime after the headquarters was moved to the Nishihowanji Temple, a visitor had arrived. Eh? Oh, his name was Matsumoto-sensei. His name was Ryojin Matsumoto, and he'd come to the Shinsengumi base under the pretense of performing physical exams on the warriors. During his visit, however, it came to light that Okita had contracted tuberculosis. September 1865. A few months after his fruitful visit, the last hot, lingering breath of summer enveloped the town. It's so hot. Atsui. Summers in Kyoto were much more humid than back in Edo. The stagnant air left you feeling sticky and sweat-pooled. Even so, all the captains were dutifully performing their appointed tasks. I think I saw Nakako and Harada training in the practice room earlier. And anyway, San just headed out to town on some errands. That meant the only one left in the quarters, reserved for the leaders, was me. While I was considering what to do with my free time that afternoon, I sensed somebody passing through the hallway just outside my room. Perhaps Inoue-san had returned from his trip. I got up to slide my door open, intending to ask if he needed any help. I looked down the hallway. Oh, Yamazaki-san? I figured he'd go report something to Hijikata-san or something, but just as this thought came to mind, Yamazaki-san turned away from the direction the commander's room was located. Everyone should be out of the compounds. Did he not know that? I didn't know what his business in this wing was, but I felt I had to tell him that everyone was out at the moment, so I followed him. He stopped in front of a specific room, glancing around to verify there was no one else in the area, and suddenly slid the door open. Wait, that's Okita's room. Seeing him, I suddenly remembered what Yamazaki-san's official job was. In addition to scouring the city for information, he had to monitor the movements of the members of the Shinsengumi and report back to Hijikata-san. Maybe I had a horrible feeling I wasn't supposed to have witnessed him going into Okita's room. I froze in place, uncertain as if... I froze in place, uncertain as to if I should leave the area quickly. I nearly shrieked when he popped out of the room in front of me, frowning.
どうして後をつけてきた？特別な理由でもあるのか？そう驚かないでくれないか。君が怯える必要はないはずだ。
But why aren't you surprised to see me? I mean, I wasn't making a sound and you appeared out of nowhere.
ああ、迷いのある足音から大体の想像はついていたが。
Damn. What? How could you?
気配すら殺せていないし、かといって悪意もない。そして俺の後をつける正当な理由がないからこその戸惑いがにじみ出ていた。
He had analyzed all of that just from hearing my footsteps. The watch was indeed incredibly skilled.
この時間であれば誰にも見つからずに済むと思ったんだが、結局のところ雪村君は一部始終を目撃したんだな。
To what exactly? Well, I only saw you step into this room.
十分だ。要件も要件だし、君に手を貸してもらおう。
What? Before I realized what he was doing, he grabbed my arm and pulled me inside. All right. Are you sure this is all right? I don't know if I should be in here.
この件は口外しないでくれ。ある重要な機密に関することだ。
What? Maybe he was in the middle of some sort of background check on Okita as part of his responsibilities as a member of the Watch. If that was true, then I had definitely stuck my nose where it didn't belong. I'm sorry. I promise I won't tell anyone.
だから怯えないでくれ。誤解のないように説明するので、しっかり聞いてほしい。俺は松本良順先生から頼まれて、この部屋を掃除しに来ただけだ。
Clean? My body sagged with sudden and overwhelming relief. That was all he was doing? Yamazaki-san's serious expression did not change, however.
これは幹部の中でもごく一部の人間しか知らないことだが、沖田さんはある病を抱えている。
Oops. It was true. I had overheard Okita and Matsumoto-sensei discuss his condition. Tuberculosis, a disease that infected the lungs and had no cure. The most common form of treatment for those diagnosed was to move them to a place with clean air in an effort to alleviate the condition. But Okita-san was vital, irreplaceable member. But Okita was a vital, irreplaceable member of the Shinsengumi, not to mention the fact that he also stubbornly refused to leave his fellow warriors. It made sense that Matsumoto-sensei would deem it important to keep his living space as hygienic as possible.
もちろん、埃の立つような掃除を本人にさせるわけにもいかない。しかし沖田さんはなぜか部屋を他人に掃除されるのがとても気に食わないらしい。だから留守を狙っていたのだ。この件についてはくれぐれも口外しないようにしてくれ。
Okay. I understand now, but would it truly be okay to do this when he clearly doesn't want it? I don't think it's not that he doesn't want someone to do the work for him, but more that he doesn't want other people to see the inside. Yamazaki-san's eyes widened and he snapped his eyes at me. The words tumbled out of his mouth.
いや、誤解しないでくれ。俺の目的はあくまで掃除だ。決して個人的な何かを盗み見るつもりはない。
Come on. I shouldn't have said that. I had never seen him so flustered. Regretting my words immediately, I did my best to backtrack. Oh, I wasn't doubting you, Yamazaki-san. It had never crossed my mind that you had other reasons to enter his room while he was out. Yamazaki-san? He frowned, his expression troubled. Perhaps a changing subject was in order. I thought for a moment. So, I was wondering, why did Matsumoto-sensei ask you in particular? The air was heavy with an awkward silence, but finally...
俺の実家は針と薬を扱っている。君のところとは逆で東洋医学だな。
Oh, really? He shrugged, his voice light and indifferent.
この経歴を見込まれたのか。松本先生、そして局長と副長から新選組の医療面を任されている。簡単な治療と衛生管理を行いつつ、沖田さんのことを気にかけるよう正式な任務が下されているんだ。
I appreciate you telling me all of this, Yamazaki-san. Thank you. I now understood the reason he had hesitated. I bowed deeply to him in gratitude. Seeing as I wasn't a member of the Shinsengumi, he didn't have to take the time to tell me about himself. But he did, sharing a kind kinship with me. He was gambling with the risk of getting in trouble if someone found out that I knew the details, and he still explained it all to me. I promise, I won't share anything you just told me. So when you said I could help you earlier, you meant with the cleaning? Then it shouldn't be a problem. I'm good at things like that. I'll do my best to help out.
ああ、よろしく頼む。
His lips curled up in a smile when I clapped my hands together enthusiastically. My heart warmed, and suddenly, I was even more eager to do something for him. We could do this. Yamazaki-san and I set about dusting and cleaning the room with quite efficiency. Before too long, we'd managed to finish roughly half of what needed to be aired out. I lifted up Okita's pillow, and I found a small bound book. Hyogoku Haiku Collection.
それは
His face paled, and I heard him swallow loudly.
やはりこの北州が掃除を嫌がった理由か。
Yamazaki-san, does that mean you know what this is? His gaze shot over to me, the lines in his face hard.
ああ、宝玉というのは土方副長の画号だ。つまり
That means this is a compilation of Hijikata-san's haikus?
土方副長はその北州を誰にも見せたがらないと聞く。ということは沖田さんが無断で副長の部屋から持ち出したのだろう。
Oh no. It looked like I uncovered something I wasn't supposed to find. What should we do? Leave it be. I feel like we should pretend we didn't see this. Yamazaki-san raised his eyebrows at me in surprise. I mean, this is Okita's problem, right? He had to have known what he was doing. So it's probably best that we don't interfere. Maybe it's possible that he intends to return it himself sometime soon. It was a matter between Okita and Hijikata-san. If either myself or Yamazaki-san, the uninvolved pair, interfered, it would appear as meddling. He'll know we were in his room if we take the book with us too. You wanted to make sure he didn't find out, right?
副長の心境を考えると団長の思いではあるが。
After a moment, he sighed deeply and shrugged. He flashed me a wry smile.
確かに雪村君の言う通りだ。俺たちは俺たちの仕事をしよう。
God damn it, Okita. Okay. Lifting the pillow again, I carefully returned the book where I found it. We continued our cleaning spree and finished without much trouble. Okita kept his room tidy and kept good care of his belongings, so we didn't have to do a lot.
今日は助かりました。もしよければ今後も俺に手を貸してくれませんか？
It seemed he wished to make it an official request. My palms were sweaty, but I nodded. I can't do much, but if I can be useful in some way, I'd love to help. He locked onto my eyes with a deadly expression.
俺は松本先生に医術を学ぶため、そして観察方としての任務のため、豚書を開ける時間が増えます。気づいた時で構いません。沖田さんの様子がおかしくないか、たまに見ていてくれませんか？
That was easy enough. I'd be glad to do it. I opened my mouth to answer.
そして俺に何かあった時は彼の看護に当たってほしい。
What?
他の人には頼めない。彼の病気について知っていて医術に明るいのは君だけだ。
He looked at me, and I could feel how important this was to him. But I had to shake my head. This job isn't something you can easily ask someone to take on, is it? If there comes a time when there is no one else, I suppose I would be the best option. But we have you, Yamazaki-san. I caught his eye and refused to look away. I tried to speak as firmly as I could. You are the one who is the best fit for the position. I don't want to hear you talk as if you won't return. Just make sure you will. I will definitely help you out as much as you need. He absorbed my words, and it took a few moments before the serious expression on his face brightened.
俺には与えられた任務を自分で果たすという心構えが足りなかったようだな。
He pulled out what looked like a thick notebook from one of his pockets. What is that?
これには沖田さんをはじめ体内の病人や怪我人の状態を逐一まとめるようにしている。松本先生の指示を受けてどのような治療をしているかも全て書き記すようにした。
Did you come up with this yourself?
大元になったのは先の健康診断の結果だ。それを松本先生のところでまとめてきた。
He put no particular emphasis on the process, but I knew it was a lot of work to put a list like that together. It was clear that he cared a great deal about everyone in the Shinsengumi. He watched over them even when they didn't realize he did.
俺が留守の間に何かあれば、これを見て対処してほしい。局長と副長にも話は通しておく。
I can only do a little, but I'll try my best. Yamazaki-san's skills and abilities dwarfed my own, but I wanted to offer what aid I could in hopes that it would be able to help. He handed me his compiled notes, and I held them carefully. When he spoke, his voice was quiet.
俺はこれから先も新選組を陰から支えることになるだろうが、俺が俺の任務を果たすために協力してくれると嬉しい。
Of course. I saw a ghost of a smile appear on his face.
君の言葉は頼もしいな。ありがとう。助かる。
If I did my utmost to perform the task I can do to the best of my ability, that was all Yamazaki-san needed for me to be happy. The fact that I could help somehow, it felt good. We finally got our one scene for Yamazaki. Finally! However, it has been past 2 hours, and that's as much as it can take of Kyoto Winds in its fullest form. We're close to the end of Chapter 3, I will say that. But I'm not willing to continue. Let's see. Alright. So, with that, we'll be back. Well, we'll be back with Yamazaki's route on Friday, 3 p.m. EST. But on Thursday, at 8, 9, 10-ish, one of those hours, I don't remember quite which one it is, we'll be back with dubbing Hakuoki Sweet School Life, because that's fun. And we'll finish Hichikato's read and then start whatever Midget picks for us, because I have no clue which route he's picking next. So, with that, please drink water, have a good day or night, don't die because you didn't drink water, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.